Learn Japanese history.
We are your navigators, Taro and Hanako.
Welcome. You're about to take a deep dive into a really transformative period of Japanese history.
Yeah, absolutely. Think of this time as a critical turning point.
Right. The country was facing these huge challenges from the West. And it led to massive internal upheaval.
And eventually, the end of a political system that had been around for centuries.
So our goal today is to really understand those first steps, the initial reactions from those in power as they tried to deal with these massive shifts.
That's right. We're focusing on how the ruling shogunate, the bakufu, and also those powerful regional domains, how they first reacted to Western powers arriving.
And the obvious differences in, like, technology and military strength.
Exactly. These first responses, sometimes they were hesitant, sometimes bold, often kind of working against each other, actually. But they ultimately laid the groundwork for the really dramatic changes that came later. It's like watching the first dominoes start to fall.
Okay, so let's picture it. Commodore Perry's fleet arrives. That must have been a genuine shock, right?
Oh, absolutely. It just threw the power gap into sharp relief. How far behind Japan was, technologically speaking.
It's like, well, a local team suddenly up against world champions.
Exactly that. And this realization, this shock, it spurred the bakufu into action. They knew they had to learn from the West to survive.
So what did they do first?
Well, one key thing was setting up the Bansho Shirobesho. It later became the Kaiseo.
Okay, what was that?
Think of it as Japan's early national center for studying Western knowledge. Science, tech, military stuff, politics.
A big shift in how they viewed the outside world then.
A fundamental shift, yeah. But it wasn't just about books.
Right. There was a pressing need for actual defense, military buildup.
Absolutely. So they created the Nagasaki Naval Training Center. The idea was to master Western-style naval techniques, modernize their fleet.
Makes sense.
And at the same time, they started building reverberatory furnaces, casting modern iron cannons, something they couldn't really do effectively before.
So these actions show they knew pretty early on that they needed to modernize militarily.
Definitely. But while the bakufu was doing this, it wasn't the only game in town.
You mean the powerful domains? The Han.
Yeah.
They were doing their own thing.
That's a crucial point. Places like Satsuma, Choshu, Saga, these powerful domains, they started their own military modernization independently.
Really? So not waiting for the central government?
Nope. They actively adopted Western military tech, partly to counter potential foreign threats, but maybe also, keeping an eye on the bakufu itself.
So this decentralized effort, that must have shifted the power balance a bit.
It absolutely did. This independent strengthening of the domains became really significant later when they started challenging the bakufu.
Right. So you've got military modernization happening centrally and regionally. But there was another major issue brewing, wasn't there? The treaties.
Ah, yes, the treaty issue. Huge point of contention. The bakufu, feeling the pressure, signed commercial treaties with Western powers.
Okay, and the problem was?
The problem was how they did it. They signed these major treaties without getting formal approval, imperial sanction from the emperor in Kyoto.
Ah, okay. So in Japanese tradition, that was a big misstep.
A major misstep. Many saw it as disrespecting the emperor, failing to uphold national sovereignty against foreign pressure.
So it wasn't just the treaty terms, but the process that caused outrage, seen as undermining the emperor.
Precisely. It seriously damaged the bakufu's legitimacy. It fueled this growing sense of national crisis and really boosted anti-bakufu feelings.
Wow. And on top of that, there was also a succession crisis happening.
Yes, adding to the instability. The shogun, Isada, was ill and didn't have an heir.
Which naturally led to a power struggle.
A big one. Two main factions emerged. One backed Tokugawa Yoshinobu.
You're seen as capable, right? Reform-minded.
Very much so. Intelligent, capable. This group, the Hitotsubashi faction, got support from some powerful domains. They saw it as a chance to reform the bakufu.
And the other side.
They supported Tokugawa Iemochi. He was younger but had a closer bloodline tie. This faction had backing from the hereditary daimyo and, importantly, from the chief minister, Ieyasuke.
Ieyasuke, right. So two camps, reform versus maybe a more conservative approach.
You could say that. And Ieyasuke, well, he acted decisively and forcefully.
Oh, so?
He made sure Iemochi became the 14th shogun, and then he launched a crackdown, the Ansei Purge.
The Ansei Purge. Sounds ominous. What did that involve?
It was pretty harsh suppression of the Hitotsubashi faction. Anyone who'd backed Yoshinobu was targeted. Court nobles, daimyo, samurai, Arrests, imprisonment.
Executions, too.
Yes, even executions. Figures like Yoshida Shoin of Choshu, a really influential thinker pushing pro-imperial, anti-foreign ideas, he was executed.
Anyone else notable?
Hashimoto Sane of Fukui. He was trying to build alliances outside the Bakufu structure, bring in talented people for reform. He was executed too.
So Inaisuke basically eliminated the opposition.
He certainly tried. It solidified his control in the short term, but it massively increased resentment against the Bakufu in the long run. It really backfired.
That suppression, trying to keep control, just fueled more dissent. Which brings us to things like Sono Joy.
Exactly. Sono Joy, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians. That became the big rallying cry.
For who?
For those angry about the treaties, angry about the Bakufu seeming weak towards foreigners, and wanting the emperor back in charge politically.
And the treaty signing without imperial consent just poured fuel on that fire.
Absolutely. But there was another idea floating around too. Kobugatai.
Kobugatai. How is that different?
It was a more moderate idea, union of court and Bakufu. The thinking was, let's strengthen the Bakufu by linking it more formally with the emperor's authority and prestige.
How do they try to do that?
The big symbolic move was arranging a marriage between Emperor Komei's sister, Kazunomiya, and the young shogun Imochi.
So two competing strategies. Expel the foreigners and restore the emperor, or unite the court and Bakufu to strengthen the existing sister.
Pretty much. But neither really solved the underlying problems, and the anger against Tinayosuke boiled over.
Right, he was assassinated, wasn't he? The Sakuradaman incident?
In 1860, yeah. Assassinated by anti-Bakufu samurai. A huge shock and a major blow to the Bakufu's authority.
So after that, what did the Bakufu do? Try to regroup.
Well, under Ando Nobumasa, they doubled down on the Kobugatai policy, trying to get closer to the imperial court, get their blessing.
But the Sonojoy folks weren't happy with that.
Not at all. They saw it as propping up the failing Bakufu.
And Ando Nobumasa. He ran into trouble too.
He did. He was attacked and forced out in the Sakashitama incident in 62. The instability just continued.
Meanwhile, the powerful domains weren't just sitting back.
No way. Shimazu Hisamitsu of Satsuma, for instance, was pushing for Bakufu reform, but from that Kobugatai angle, trying to work with both sides.
Did the Bakufu listen? Did they make concessions?
They had to, really. Tokugawa Yoshinobu, the guy who lost the succession fight earlier, he was brought back in as guardian of the shogun.
Interesting.
And Matsudara Yoshinaga became president of political affairs. They also created a new position, the Kyoto military governor, to keep order in the capital.
Who got that job?
Matsudara Katamori of Aizu Domain, a powerful figure meant to stabilize things in Kyoto.
But all this political maneuvering didn't stop the anti-foreign sentiment, did it? The Sonojoy violence.
No, that continued and even escalated. You had the Namamugi incident in 62.
What happened there?
Satsuma samurai killed some British citizens near Kanagawa.
Oof. That must have caused problems.
Big problems. It led directly to the Anglo-Satsuma War the next year. The British Navy showed up and bombarded Kagoshima, Satsuma's capital.
Wow. So Satsuma got a very direct, very harsh lesson in Western military power.
They certainly did. It was a real eye-opener for them about the technology gap.
And Choshu domain got involved too, against foreigners.
Yes. The Bakufu, under pressure from the radicals, actually ordered domains to expel foreigners. Choshu took it seriously.
Oh.
They started firing on foreign ships passing through the Strait of Shimonoseki. A very provocative move.
Which would definitely have consequences later.
Oh, yes. Meanwhile, back in Kyoto, things were getting tense within the court itself.
More political maneuvering.
Yep. Conservative nobles, working with Aizu domain, staged a coup in August 63.
The August 18th coup. What was the goal?
To kick out the radical nobles and the Choshu forces who had gained influence at court, people like Sanja Senatomi were forced out.
So a setback for the radical Sonojoy faction.
A major one. But Choshu wasn't happy about being pushed out.
I can imagine. Did they react?
They did. In 1864, after another incident, the Aikidaya incident, Choshu forces marched on Kyoto.
Tried to regain influence.
Exactly. But it led to the Kinmon incident, or Hamaguri-Goman incident.
What happened?
Satsuma and Aizu forces teamed up again and defeated Choshu quite decisively.
And the result for Choshu?
They were officially declared an enemy of the court, which then prompted the Bakufu to launch the first Choshu expedition.
A punitive campaign against them. So internal conflicts just kept escalating.
It was incredibly volatile. And layered on top of all this was the foreign reaction to Choshu's earlier actions.
The firing on ships in Shimonoseki.
Yeah.
Retaliation was coming.
It was. In 1864, a combined fleet, British, American, French, Dutch, sailed in and bombarded the Choshu forts at Shimonoseki.
Another powerful demonstration of Western military might.
A very powerful one. It completely crushed the Choshu faction's belief that they could just expel foreigners by force.
Oh, they had to back down.
They had no choice. Choshu had to seek peace with the Allied fleet and also submit, at least temporarily, to the Bakufu.
This bombardment at Shimonoseki, it feels like a real turning point, especially for Choshu.
It absolutely was. It forced a major rethink.
How so?
Well, within Choshu, you saw the rise of new leaders, often from lower samurai ranks, guys like Takasugi Shinsaku and Katsura Kogoro, who later became Kido Takayoshi.
What was their new thinking?
They realized joy, just expelling foreigners, was impossible. The real goal had to be adopting Western military tech, strengthening Choshu, and overthrowing the Bakufu.
Ah, so the focus shifted from joy to Tōbaku, overthrow the Bakufu.
Precisely. They even started recruiting commoners, farmers, townspeople into new military units like the Kiheitai to boost their strength.
And what about Satsuma? They'd had their own wake-up call with the British bombardment.
Very similar shift there. Lower-ranking samurai like Saigo Takamori and Okubo Toshimichi gained control.
And their policy.
They also became increasingly anti-Bakufu. Both Satsuma and Choshu, having felt Western military power firsthand, basically abandoned joy.
And instead focused on
modernization. They started looking specifically to Great Britain for help with military technology and training.
It's fascinating how direct conflict forced such a strategic pivot. From expel the barbarians, to learn from the barbarians, to overthrow our own government.
It's a huge shift. And while this was happening, the foreign powers were definitely taking advantage of Japan's internal turmoil. Well, in 1865, they pressured the Bakufu to get imperial ratification for the existing treaties, giving them more legitimacy.
And the Bakufu agreed.
They were weak. They had little choice. Then, in 1866, they were forced to sign new tax agreements very favorable to the foreign powers.
More fuel for anti-Bakufu sentiment, I imagine.
Definitely. And foreign diplomats were watching closely. The British minister, Harry Parkes, started thinking the Bakufu couldn't govern effectively anymore.
So he started looking towards
an alliance of the powerful domains like Satsuma and Choshu, maybe centered around the emperor. He saw them as the future.
Interesting. But the Bakufu wasn't dead yet. Did they try to fight back?
They did. They still had some support, particularly from France under Minister Roches. They pushed ahead with their own military reforms, trying to catch up.
And they tried to deal with Choshu again.
Yes. In 1866, they launched the second Choshu expedition, another attempt to crush them.
But things were different this time.
Very different, because now Satsuma and Choshu had a secret alliance.
The Satu Alliance.
Yeah.
Brokered by Sakamoto Ryoma, right?
Exactly. Him and Nakaoka Shintaro from Tosa Domain helped make it happen. So, when the Bakufu called for troops, Satsuma refused to send any.
That must have weakened the expedition significantly.
Hugely. And Choshu, with its new modernized units like the Kiheitai, fought incredibly well. They defeated the Bakufu forces in several key battles.
A major embarrassment for the Bakufu.
Massive. And then Shogun Iemochi died during the campaign, which basically led to the whole thing being called off.
Wow. So the Bakufu is crumbling militarily, politically. What about socially? What was happening among the common people during all this chaos?
Huge social unrest. Peasant uprisings demanding lower taxes were happening all the time, especially during that second Choshu campaign.
And in the cities.
Riots by the urban Port Ushikawashi became really widespread in places like Edo and Osaka. People were desperate.
And there was that strange Ija Naika phenomenon, too.
Oh, yes, Ija Naika, ain't it great? Or who cares? It swept the country in 1867.
What was it?
Rumors spread about sacred amulets falling from the sky, and people just erupted into these mass ecstatic dances and festivals in the streets.
Like a collective release or breakdown.
Probably a bit of both. A reaction to the extreme uncertainty and anxiety. People were also turning to new popular religions that were popping up.
Whoa.
Shinto-based ones like Kurozumikyo, Tenrikyo, Konkokyo. They offered salvation, answers, comfort in really turbulent times.
So society's fraying at the edges. The Bakufu's military and political power is collapsing. This all sets the stage for the final act, right? The Taisei Hoken.
Exactly. The grand restoration of political power. After the failure of the second Choshu expedition, Tokugawa Yoshinobu becomes the 15th shogun, the last one.
But the Bakufu is basically finished by this point.
Pretty much. Its authority was gone. And figures like Sakamoto Ryoma and Goto Shijiro from Tosa were pushing for a solution.
What was their idea?
a return of power to the Emperor Tensei Khan. But they envisioned a kind of cooperative government afterwards. Tokugawa, daimyo, samurai working together, maybe under the emperor, to face the West. A broader Kobuku Gatai.
So, a peaceful transition, ideally.
That was the hope. The former lord of Tosa, Yamanouchi Toyoshige, formally advised Yoshinobu to do it, to return power to the court.
And Yoshinobu agreed.
He did. He probably saw the writing on the wall, maybe hoped to retain some influence in whatever came next. On October 14, 1867, he formally offered to return political authority to the emperor.
A huge historical moment. The end of over 260 years of Tokugawa rule.
A monumental moment.
Yep.
But it wasn't quite that simple.
Oh, the anti-Baku forces weren't satisfied.
Not at all. Satsuma, Choshu, and their allies among the radical court nobles like Iwakura Tomomi, they weren't interested in Yoshinobu having any role in the future.
So while Yoshinobu was offering to return power,
they had already secretly obtained an imperial order to overthrow the Bakufu by force. They were planning a coup.
Wow, so Yoshinobu's move was almost irrelevant to them.
In a way, yes. They moved quickly. On December 9, 1867, they declared the Meiji Restoration, the Oseifuko no Dagore.
The restoration of imperial rule.
Exactly. A new government was declared under the young Emperor Meiji, made up of court nobles, powerful daimyo, and key samurai. The Edo Bakufu was officially over.
A complete shift. What happened immediately?
Well, old positions like regent and chancellor were abolished. 3 new top posts were created: president, vice president, and counselor.
And who filled these roles? Was it just the old elites?
No, and this is important. Talented people from lower samurai ranks were brought into the new government alongside the nobles and daimyo lords. A real sign of change.
And what about Yoshinobu, the last shogun? What was decided about him?
That was debated fiercely on the very night of the restoration at the Kogosho Conference.
And the outcome?
The hardliners won. It was decided Yoshinobu would not be part of the new government. He was ordered to give up his court rank and all his lands, Jikan-nochi.
Stripped of power and position completely.
Completely. Which, naturally, the former Bakufu loyalists strongly opposed. So the restoration decree wasn't the end of the fighting, but it was the end of the shogunate.
So you can really see how those initial, maybe uncertain responses to Perry, the reforms, the domain actions, the treaty anger, the power struggles.
It all just built and built until the whole system collapsed.
Absolutely. It's this fascinating interplay, isn't it? Trying to hold on to tradition versus the absolute need to adapt to this completely changed world.
Yeah, the seeds of modern Japan were definitely sown in all that chaos.
No question.
It makes you wonder, though, what if the Bakufu had been more unified early on? Or if the domains hadn't built up their own power bases, could things have gone differently?
It's one of history's great what-ifs. But understanding this period, these initial responses and conflicts, it's absolutely crucial for grasping the Meiji Restoration and everything that followed. Japan's rapid modernization didn't come out of nowhere.
Right. There's so much more to dig into here. The people, the specific ideas, the global context. We definitely encourage you to keep exploring this incredibly pivotal time in Japanese history.